Carlos, are you on?
I'm here.
Hi.
Hi, Annette. How are you?
I'm surviving my technical Zoom difficulties over here.
Maybe it's all the rain that we're getting. I think my backyard is flooding. We'll see.
We're just gonna go with the flow, you know? That's all we can do today.
That's all we have to do with this theme. Yeah. It's a good time for rain.
So welcome everyone to this evening PechaKucha Volume 10. The theme is Flow tonight. This event is hosted by Friends of Architecture Santa Fe, where we are our all-volunteer board and a group of amazing program volunteers are dedicated to producing public programming that really promotes intentional placemaking and strengthening our community connection. Tonight is our PechaKucha program, and Carlos, will you tell our audience a little bit how this works?
Yeah. So the PechaKucha format is 20 slides that advance after 20 seconds each, which give presenters only 6 minutes and 40 seconds to convey a unique perspective on a topic. Tonight's topic or theme is flow, which is loosely based around how we think about flowing past boundaries and around different barriers. And I think that we've got 4 different presenters with perspectives that I'm very excited to hear.
Awesome. And we do have a few people we want to thank up front, right?
We do, yeah. On our back end, we've got 2 volunteers that are helping out with a lot of the issues that always come up that we're managing. Dave Ritzman is juggling all of our Zoom and recordation needs, and Chris Clavio is managing all of the different visuals that we'll be seeing. As far as visuals go, I definitely want to give a shout out to Ailu Colavecchia, who designed the poster for tonight's event. Along with your company, Annette, Six Blooms. Six Blooms is also an event sponsor for tonight, so huge shout out to yourselves. This organization and all the event programming that we do is only able to run on the generous donations that we receive from all of our different attendees. So huge thanks to them, and we'll give a larger shout out later in the event.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So if I may, I would just go ahead and get started with our first presenter.
So the first presenter is Maureo Fernandez. Maureo, I believe you're here. Annette, do you want to introduce us to Maureo?
Absolutely. So Maureo and I go way back. But it's ever since I've known Maureo, I always felt like advocate was truly their calling. Currently, Maureo is the Associate State Director of Clean Water Action in Massachusetts. And they also served on the Greater Boston PFLAG, as well as on a steering committee at United World College, overseeing anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Tonight, Maureo is going to be sharing something that is been quite a journey for Maureo in understanding gender. So, Maureo, are you on with us?
Yes, I am here. Can folks hear me?
Awesome. Yeah, take it away.
Awesome, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Maureo, and I am bad at gender. And when I say that I'm bad at gender, I guess that what I really mean is that I've never been able to convince myself that gender makes much sense. It's like a word on a page that you've stared at for too long. In my fantasy realm, my avatar was always a boy. In video games, make-believe with friends, it was the role that I chose. And in the beginning, there was no distress being a girl because I was allowed to be a tomboy. I would consider that to be my first gender. A girl who enjoyed being a boy who looked like a girl. Young children are in many ways sexless, or at least they do lack any differential sex characteristics aside from genitalia. The only visible differentiations when meeting children in public are ones of our own creation. And children are also, in my experience and according to some studies, genderless, or at least they are gender expansive. Gender expansiveness or gender fluidity has always existed in both children and adults. Across every continent, many different cultures have traditionally held the belief that more than two genders exist. And in some cultures, it's believed that there are people who transform themselves into bridges across an ocean of gender difference. I believe that I would have been one of these people, that given the opportunity, I would have had a role as someone who understood masculinity from the context of a female body. But there is no such rule for me in this time, in this culture. Only male, female, and those of us at the mercy of a world if we choose to declare that we are both or neither. When I went through puberty, it became clear that being a tomboy would not be as easy as it had been before. I started collecting mental snapshots of all the things that made someone a woman, and I saw too few of those traits in myself. It felt like I had been given the wrong set of instructions. When I saw men and women in media, I always thought it would feel more natural to be in the position of the man. When I was told that the way that I was wearing my clothes de-emphasized my hips, in my head, I thought, well, that's preferred. This mismatch with society's expectations was one of both pride and distress. Before I considered myself trans, I considered myself a feminist, and I still do. I took pride in my audacity to break from feminine conformity. I wore it like a badge of honor, a political statement. Statements can be a salve for personal pain, a way to feel sure that your lack of belonging at least matters in some broader context. And so I also began experiencing a lot of guilt when I started to consider that the force of my political presence might not be enough to counteract the daily stress and exhaustion that accompanied feeling so utterly wrong. I started flirting in secret with the concept of gender transition when I found it was possible at age 16. I spent hours watching YouTube videos of females that had transitioned to male, wanting to understand every medical procedure, even as I was trying to weigh the potential political betrayal that I was considering. Why change one's perceived gender if you don't believe gender to be inherently tied to a body? Why take hormones, go through surgery, demand others speak a different name, different pronouns, if you believe your soul to encapsulate both the masculine, the feminine, and perhaps all the spaces in between? I was committed to being a sort of butch martyr, taking some sort of joy in the idea that at least others were as uncomfortable with me as I was with myself. But still, always there was a dull ache, constant buzzing. Given enough time, constantly dripping water can cut through stone, and that is what denying myself felt like to me, slowly dripping water, eroding what I had been told was set in stone. Sometimes paradoxes get answered with absolute clarity in unexpected ways, and for me, the revelation came after a near-death car crash. In an attempt to brake before my car hit the car in front of me, my leg, which was essentially acting as a tension rod, broke in half, perhaps another moment where rigidity failed me. As I was lying in the emergency room in immense pain, I remember being surrounded by female nurses trying to reassure me what a strong girl I was, what a pretty girl I was. And their words, while well-intended, did not bring me comfort. It made me feel utterly unseen. And in that moment of absolute vulnerability, I surrendered to a voice I was constantly trying to push away. I don't want to be buried in this body. There's a quote in the Harry Potter series that perfectly explains my choice to follow this voice. Harry asks Dumbledore, his dead mentor, if their interaction was real or was it all in his head. Dumbledore laughs and says, "My dear Harry, of course it's all in your head, but why on earth should that mean it isn't real?" I have gone to great lengths, financially, interpersonally, physically, to change my perceived gender in society. And yet I also cannot bring myself to commit to simply calling myself a man. I still feel the trueness both of my beginning as a female and my inherent masculinity that made it hard to be one. Gender for me remains a contradiction. It is simultaneously not real and terribly important, and I have made peace with this. I have been most harmed by gender when I believed it to be set in stone, something resolute that we either succeed or fail at. I have done most harm to my spirit when I've seen my body as something that should emulate sculpture, fixed, hard, unmovable. When I gave up resolution, I went searching for acceptance. If self-denial has felt like stone cut by water, then self-realization has been a practice in becoming water, embracing my own fluidity. This has expanded my capacity to make space for others' paradoxical behaviors and outlook. I hold great empathy towards others' confusion towards me. I know the confusion well. I am not asserting that all people who examine gender will find theirs to be fluid, but I can't help but wonder what the world would look like if we approached the paradoxical, the non-conforming parts of ourselves and others with a similar empathy. It is such a fundamental human need to be recognized, to be understood. I remind myself regularly that this is true for me also, that it is okay to find a vessel that contains you well. And in a world that often demands so much false confidence, it is okay to be less like stone and more like water.
Thank you, Maureo. I think that's a fascinating look at gender and how you talk about transcending that. I thought it was kind of interesting. You were chatting about some of the ways that you gave up this fixed form of resolution, and you gave up the binary that you were, before kind of struggling to fit into, and you sought acceptance about embracing that fluidity. And I'm wondering, what has that, how has that served you? How has that helped you understand yourself and understand concepts of gender?
Yeah, I think letting go of that kind of need to always both be sure and always, early on in my transition, one thing that I said a lot was, I just want to be undeniable. Like, I want people to see me and not question me at all. And I think that it's pretty common for people who are gender nonconforming, whether you transition or not, to get a lot of looks like, are you a boy? Are you a girl? And see people sort of do that awkward dance. And I think that especially if you're an adult who transitions, I went through a female puberty. And so things like my height, my facial structure, there are things that testosterone changed some of, but not all of. And for me, I think that in the beginning, I was looking for a similar sort of absolute that I was when I was trying to be a woman, in the same way when I transitioned about being a man. And for me, just embracing my own uniqueness and saying, if I exist, that's who I am, and really letting go of the need for others' validation was a real turning point for me. And I think it made me a more confident person. And I think that people respond to that.
I just realized today, Maureo, that so Maureo and I trusted their wisdom so much that I think, how old were you when you were my ring person?
11, 10, somewhere around there.
Yeah. So I realized that day you had to wear a dress, and I'm really sorry.
That's all right.
Oh, yeah. I think it's really fascinating. Maureo and I have personal relationship in that one of my child is also gender neutral or non-binary, and it's amazing what happens when there's an advocate who's willing to come forward and share and to kind of give this resources and I think I share back with you, just like within this very small amount of time from when you were going through school here in Santa Fe to where it is now, where the district really is, has designated a person who oversees the wellness and well-being,
Yeah.
of students who are, non-binary, trans, bi, homosexuality, homosexuals. And so all of this kind of conversation, even within the school district here, is much more advanced than when you were going through that.
Yeah.
So, so thank you I know it's been a long journey, but it makes me so happy to see you and to meet your partner, and see how happy you guys are and really hitting your stride, I feel like, in the world.
Oh, thank you. I remember what a gift older trans people were to me as I was considered in transitioning. So it always makes me really happy when I know that other younger trans people also then get to see me and I get to be that for someone else.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Something I do want to note, we do have a Q&A and chat box. If anybody from the audience wants to ask some questions, we could try to get to some of those. Maureo, I had a question. You mentioned some transitioning as a teenager, and we've been talking a little bit about changing politics and things like that. I'm wondering, this has become a political issue. How do we think about politics? How do we think about democracy? How do we think about decision making? How do we think about all of that in this context?
This is a dangerous question to ask me because my day job is political advocate. So I'm a policy wonk in addition to kind of this personal narrative. I think that unfortunately, marginalized groups are often scapegoated for these like culture wars that we're calling them. And so it's nothing new. I think we've seen it happen to gay people before gay marriage passed. We see it happen all the time to Black people, other people of color. And I think that the really unfortunate thing about it is that it's not really about those people, because if it was, you would actually listen to trans people and listen to some of our narratives about both how painful it is to go through a puberty that you don't want. And that's a huge issue right now, where a bunch of states are essentially trying to make it illegal for families and doctors to make that decision together. They talk about children being too young to know for sure. And what they leave out is that one of the treatments they're actually trying to outlaw in multiple states are hormone blockers that essentially give young people more time to make an informed decision. And so I think that when you talk about people, you should ask the people who you're talking about first. And a lot of trans people will tell you that, myself included, if I had had the opportunity to go on hormone blockers, I think it would have saved me a lot of the sort of like internal agonizing that I talked about in the presentation. And I guess the one other thing that I would say is that I know that the trans bathroom issue is a huge thing. And speaking to myself personally, the only question I've ever had when trying to use a bathroom in public is, where will I be safest and where will others be the most comfortable with me? And so legislation is really bad, I think, at dealing with nuance, and trans people we're a very nuanced bunch. Technically, when I'm wearing a full beard, according to some laws, laws being proposed, I should still be in the women's bathroom because I was assigned female at birth. And there are a lot of taller, burlier trans guys than I am who would look really out of place in a women's bathroom. And I think that usually people who are already really conscious about their gender and how it's read in society are going to make the right choices when it comes to what's safest and most comfortable, both for ourselves and other people.
Maureo, I'm wondering how can the audience move forward in empathetic ways? How do we understand more? How can we shift the ways that we're thinking to have a better understanding of the trans community, of policies, of how we just move through the world, of how we think about gender?
I mean, I think the most basic answer is, imagine some people might have a trans loved one who hasn't come out yet. So imagine how the words you're saying now might land for someone who comes out 20, 35 years later. And I think the really big piece, though, is empathy. Is a really good place to start with. Empathy is self-empathy. So I think that everyone in this culture is harmed by gender. Women are told to make themselves small, to not interrupt, that they have to be a certain size. I think that men are really punished for vulnerability and really basic human emotions like fear. And so what I would say is, actually, when you see it, I think one thing that trans people bring up for people is this sense of like, that's not allowed, like that's not possible. And so actually, I feel like if someone's having reactions of fear, disgust, discomfort, I would actually look further at that, and I would ask yourselves, you know, what are times that gender rigidity has harmed me or harmed someone I love? Because I really do believe that the liberation of trans people would lead to gender liberation broadly, because really what we're saying is that the body you were born in doesn't have to define any of your behaviors, your personalities, your interests, or your outlooks. And so I think that's something that actually benefits everyone. So any sort of empathy, I think, should start with ways that we've internalized oppressive gender roles, whether you're trans or not.
Maureo, I think it's fascinating. You talked about some historic examples, looking at people who, you know, bridged that divide, who were flowing between genders, who were able to rethink what gender meant from being outside of it. I think you're a great example of that, being able to think about that, being able to analyze that. Annette, did you have any questions? Any more questions?
I just wanted to point, Maureo, when you have a moment, because I know we have to move on to the next presenter, but we have some lovely comments in there for you, and as well as a really great question regarding, I think this is an interesting question about like, how can architecture and design better serve trans community? You know, like this whole gender bathroom thing, it's just like one layer of physical built environment design. This is so if you can, if there's any thoughts that you can share, that would be, you know, kind of feed that directly to the thread, that would be great.
Yeah, in the chat or now?
I mean, if you have any thoughts on that specifically on the architecture and design piece.
I mean, the really big one is if there's an opportunity to put in a single stall bathroom, please do. I think that that's a really comfortable thing. I think for a lot of trans people, especially trans people who aren't read clearly as male or female. I know that especially like in the first year of my transition, when, you know, I would get gendered as male and female 5 minutes apart, it was always really helpful just to have a bathroom that I didn't have to negotiate that in. Plus, who doesn't like a single stall bathroom in public?
Exactly. So, you know, that's a really interesting thing. You know, recently we had a commission, planning commission here where there's a public bathroom that's being installed right across from off of Water Street. I'm not sure you remember that parking lot there downtown. And I think there's an assumption that a family bathroom is good enough for trans bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts about this?
I guess I personally do think so. If it's a single stall bathroom, I think that it serves the purpose. I think actually sometimes I laugh about this and I take pictures. Sometimes like I think they're meant to be funny, but it sometimes has the opposite intended effect when it's like a man, a woman, and then like a mermaid. I live on the East Coast, so maybe this is like not the case in New Mexico, but there's like a mermaid or an alien and something that's like, we don't care, just pee. And so I think that sometimes like drawing more attention to gender nonconformity can be a double-edged sword, especially in public. So I think that I probably wouldn't be thrilled to use a trans labeled bathroom, mostly because really what you're trying to do when you're picking a bathroom is avoid being harassed or assaulted in public. And so I think in that way, the more anonymity, in my case, is preferred.
That's interesting, because again, it's still putting that label, it's still trying to create like the third gender, as opposed to what you're talking about, which is that it's not, you know, it doesn't have to clearly be that identified in some ways.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think like if we really lived in a world where gender didn't matter and gender violence wasn't as common, I think that I think in an ideal world, different bodies would feel comfortable using the bathroom with each other. And I know that that's not always the case in this world, but I will say one of my favorite parts of hanging out with other trans people is just like the comfort with so many different kinds of bodies. being in intimate spaces like that together. And so I live in a world where it's not actually that weird to be using the bathroom with someone who doesn't have the exact same body as you do. And it's a really great place to live. And I think another example of, if we had more gender liberation, we might also have less gender violence.
That's a great point. Maureo, thank you so much. I think that your presentation was laden with meaning and hope and incredible interest. I'm going to be watching this. All the all the presentations will be recorded, and so we'll have links on how to find that. So thank you very much. I'll definitely be watching this more.
Thank you, Maureo.
Thank you. So Annette, next we have Erin. Erin, are you available? Hi there, Erin.
Yes,
you want to introduce us to Erin?
Hi.
So, Erin, actually, I'm like, have no idea. So Erin works for a national company called Biohabitats. And as far as I can tell, I'm just gonna like boil it down to the gist of what I understand here. And Erin, you can correct me after your presentation, is that their company takes a look at water filtration system and create essentially like a mini ecosystem in there to do the filtration rather than using any kind of weird chemicals that people may want to use. Is that about right, Erin?
Part of it, sure. Mm-hmm.
And so she's here to share with us, let me make sure I pronounce it correctly, Biophilic Design. Is that correct? Okay. So I think in this presentation, you're going to explain how all of this work. Awesome. Okay, take it away.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate the invitation to be here and to meet you all. So I want to paint a picture. We are living in a highly urbanized, heavily constructed world. We are indoors and on devices. The stresses of climate change and environmental degradation are very real. And we have ways that we can address that. Children are inside, and as humans, we are spending approximately 90% of our time inside. But if you look back into the history, we as humans evolved in nature, as part of nature. Our human bodies, our minds, and our senses are of the wild. In the 1980s, famed biologist E.O. Wilson published the Biophilia Hypothesis, which is that human beings subconsciously seek connections with the rest of life. Biophilic design, advanced by visionaries such as Dr. Stephen Kellert of Yale, applies this idea to the built environment. This is a direct response to our loss of connection with nature. Biophilic design generates measurable improvements in stress reduction, cognitive performance, emotion, and mood. Critically, it may also be a key to inspire a culture of sustainability. This image from the Omega Institute is both the world's first living building and a 50,000 gallon per day wastewater treatment plant. Biophilic design, at its core, helps us love, which in turn inspires us to protect, heal, and restore. For me, an engineer focused on water for the past 20 years, the most important work starts with the discovery of the power and beauty of water. My son, pictured here, shows me what it means to listen to water, like this on the banks of the Pecos River. This connects me to place, informs my work, and inspires my interest in the biophilic design of water infrastructure beyond buildings. So how do we do this? Dr. Stephen Kellert developed some tenets. Design for people as a part of nature, inherent, no separation. Integrate with functions of place and ecosystem, so pay close attention, and create inspirational, restorative, healthy spaces. We need to focus our energy on creating connections to nature, and water infrastructure opens up an ideal opportunity to do this, because after all, water is life. I want to give an example using this project at the Sidwell Friends School, which was the first to achieve LEED Platinum in the US. It's a little bit over 10 years old, so it's been around for a bit. Led by landscape architects Andrew Pogon, we completely enveloped the entrance courtyard with natural systems to process wastewater for flushing toilets and rain gardens for cleaning stormwater, while introducing a biology study pond into the heart of the schoolyard. The experience that students encounter, especially during a rainstorm, is nothing short of revelatory. At the Candida building at Georgia Tech, creating good habitat for people was inherent in the design of this recently certified living building. It harvests all of its own water, generates its own power, and treats its own waste. A biophilic design process at the beginning set a strong course for melding beauty and function throughout. For example, the edible wild landscape is supported entirely by harvested condensate and rainwater, while absorbing the majority of stormwater, which is quite a feat for Atlanta. It invites a pause beneath that solar canopy, which is also a shade and a water collection device. Throughout the project, water is visibly harvested, cycled, and treated. You can go into this building and have a drink of actual fresh rainwater, use the composting toilets, and know that your gray water is being processed in the wetlands right out front. All the cleaned water is infiltrated and the compost turned into soil amendments. Conversely, at the next project, the Josie Pavilion, the stormwater and wastewater systems blend seamlessly into the expanse of grasslands that surrounds the project. Here, ranchers show how to use rotational grazing as a tool for watershed restoration. It is important that both the building and its infrastructure merged with the prairie. This project won a Biophilic Design Award for that concept. Water infrastructure, beyond the building idea, is a place for us to create biophilic spaces within the built fabric of even our most challenging urban locations, and at various scales. I'm going to show a few examples of how that can be done. Restoration of urban waterfronts that have been denuded of their natural edges and suffering profound pollution and aquatic habitat loss can benefit from biophilic design. Floating marshes and living shorelines like those shown here at the National Aquarium welcome nature back into cities and to their underwater realms while creating green space for the community. Ecological filtration strategies for water features harness the genius of plants and microbiota to increase the sustainability of these features. This one at Glenstone, a world-class art museum, has a low energy and carbon footprint and is contemplative, beautiful, and immersive. At Georgia Tech, we helped the client and the design team establish a goal that this research building should protect the Chattahoochee River beyond just providing research. Harvested rain, stormwater, and condensate support a new wetland while offsetting all non-potable uses for toilets and irrigation. Water efficiency, habitat, and beauty. These need to go hand in hand if we hope to get anywhere. Omega, the CEO, Skip Backus, when faced with upgrading a patchwork of aging septic systems, chose to radically reinvent their infrastructure. His goal was simple: to help people see the connection between our actions and the health of water on the planet. This resulting living building is toured by tens of thousands of people a year. Similarly, built from the ground up to cultivate the next crop of sustainable leaders, this campus was developed as a net zero campus from the start at Chatham University. This wetland, located prominently at the entrance, processes wastewater for reuse in the toilets, teaching, growing, showing. And finally, scale is not a limitation. Clean Water Services, the regional water utility, came to us to develop this 90-acre natural treatment system to polish and cool wastewater effluent before it entered a critical cold water fishery. This nature-based solution was an ideal alternative to a carbon-intensive chiller plant. And I think, Annette, because the slides weren't quite right, you missed my last one. But that project has its own TripAdvisor page, and the reviews speak for itself as a place of beauty and habitat. And that's what biophilic design gives us that opportunity to embrace. Thank you.
Erin, this is great, and it's got my mind just jogging all over the place right now. And one of the first things that's coming up for me is by seeing all of these different examples, one part of me is upset that we don't see this more, and I'm also just like, my mind is just like, nature, you know, well, it's because there's too many bugs, it's too hot, it's too cold, and nature's destructive and it's dirty and like all these other things. Like how do we overcome that? How do we actually bring nature into the places that we're at. You're talking about not having this division, not having these like clearly defined walls. And I'm wondering, how do you overcome the ways that we usually try to build that? I don't know. How do you talk to clients about like, this is something they should try?
Well, the biophilia hypothesis speaks a little bit about that, where there are many places in nature where we do not feel safe as humans. That may have something to do with where we evolved and how we evolved. And so, for example, we want to have some level of shelter, not just be fully exposed, but we want to be able to see predators or see, up on the horizon, be able to, get a view. We want some shade, but not total shade, dappled light, some wind, but not windy. And so there are some clues about how to create comfortable places within the biophilia and biophilic design practice. There's been a lot of exploration for that for buildings. And it's not always just bringing nature into the space. So that's the obvious one with the water infrastructure. But there are ways of emulating the form of nature, the way that the light works, the way that sound or smell might work, that can also elicit those biological responses. And so part of the work, I think, is understanding that and then working to create those kind of ideal conditions for humans to be comfortable. And in the landscape, that extends. I mean, we live in the desert, right? We know that in too hot locations or too exposed to the wind that happens this time of year is not comfortable. So creating those opportunities for kind of shelter and refuge.
Carlos and Erin, we have Ani is wanting to ask a question, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn the mic on, okay? Go right ahead, Ani.
Hi, Erin. Thank you for bringing our attention to biophilic design. I know that one of the barriers that often is a problem are building codes and how you must have flush toilets, and you must have flush toilets that use X amount of gallons, for example. What are the most important codes anywhere? What are some of the oldest codes that really need to be changed to accommodate biophilic design in general, do you think?
Yeah, great question. So that code shift is an important piece that affects how we use water in general, how we treat water, and can be a heavy limitation to being able to kind of live within your water footprint. And so the ones that most need to change are those that limit us from using alternative water for non-potable uses. So limitations on toilet flushing with harvested rainwater or gray water, or irrigation with recycled water, that needs to go, because there's no reason for us to be using pristine drinking water, which is just going to become more and more critical to do those functions. And so there are various places who've excelled at moving the rules, including Oregon and Texas. Even here in New Mexico, the codes that allow us to use gray water from residences for irrigation is a model code. So there are examples out there. And so that addresses the kind of water piece, but the biophilic piece is, codes that have openness for how you treat water and how you process water. And there are some states that have codes for treatment wetlands, for example, so that doesn't become so foreign or so hard for you to implement on a project, right? Great question.
Erin, how do you think about some of the closed system maintenance requirements, some of the wear that happens to the different infrastructure that we use? There's a lot of different parts of nature that either are wearing down the different kinds of infrastructure that we're working on, or that are building systems up that in natural systems, you've got more of that flow, and some of these closed systems, it's harder to work with. How can we try to overcome some of that?
I'm not entirely sure I understand that question, but what I will say about nature-based systems, nature-based strategies, is that the science and the application of that is growing, and there's an immense amount of interest in green infrastructure for stormwater and other functions, restoration and management of water that provides other benefits like habitat, carbon sequestration. And those systems are necessarily complex, somewhat unpredictable. They're open, and they are more challenging to work with from an engineering perspective, certainly, and maybe from a regulatory one, versus like closed, hard engineered gray infrastructure systems that have a relatively predictable outcome, but that have relatively significant downsides in terms of carbon intensity and energy intensity and operational requirements. So there's a flexibility that has to be built in to know that these natural systems or nature-based solutions have a little more natural variation in them, but that overall the net benefit is generally in the positive, we think. And that does seem to be proving out. So there's got to be some flexibility in how they're not apples to apples. And so, finding the ways that allow the nature-based systems to replace the gray, rigid, closed infrastructure is what we need to do.
Thank you. Erin, how can we find out more? Where can people go to learn more about how to think about either designing, commercial institutional buildings, but also in redeveloping their gardens, residential structures? Where are places that people can go to learn more about these systems?
So the International Living Future Institute has really been bringing people together, congregating people around this idea of biophilic design, and producing some resources and some presence at conferences and whatnot. They're the group who administers the Living Building Challenge. And that's where I would suggest you go, is explore what the Living Building Challenge is, because its framework can be applied, even if you don't pursue it, at all scales for all kinds of different projects. And one of the requirements of it is beauty. And within that is this idea of actually having a biophilic design process as a start to make sure you're looking at those opportunities. So to me, I think they've got a pretty nice thing going with teaching designers, and they're architecture and engineering heavy, but having those resources available. So they've got great website, books on it, videos, etc. Terrapin Bright Green, one of our other collaborators, are a consulting firm founded by Bill Browning. They've also been publishing great resources and online podcasts and videos and whatnot, and they're out in New York.
Great. Erin, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all for the invitation. What fun.
Yeah. Annette, do you want to introduce your next presenters?
Absolutely. Next up is Queen Bee Music Association, and the amazing co-founder and music educator, Lindsay Taylor and Brian Nelson are here. I hope they're here.
Yeah, we're here.
We're here.
Hi. Hi.
You know how like Zoom just like hides people, So, thank you so much for, coming on tonight to be part of our flow theme. So Carlos, Brian, and Lindsay are phenomenal music teachers, and they are also have their own band, and they're practicing musicians themselves. And they're here to share with us how we can really benefit, all of us, from learning music. So take it away, guys.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm Brian Nelson.
And I'm Lindsay Taylor.
And as Annette so kindly said, we're here from the Queen Bee Music Association.
And Queen Bee is a nonprofit that we actually started here in Santa Fe in 2019. And In case you had trouble guessing, we're all about music.
How about that?
So this evening we're going to talk about music as a practice, music as background. What can we benefit from with having music in our lives? And to start, music can inspire so many different things. It can inspire different moods. It can inspire creativity. Depending on the music you're listening to, you may find yourself in a very calm mood, maybe picturing yourself on a beach, sipping a cocktail, or maybe you just want to rage a little bit and put on some real heavy rock. But music can engage our brain activity and actually distract us from the moments in life that are keeping us from our own creative flow state. And you may have experienced this phenomenon yourself while you're creating something, or while you're studying or working or even driving to work. Music has an ability to relax and focus us. And there is a lot of scientific research out there right now talking about how music relates to the brain function that we have. And in an article by Cherie Lucas on pbs.org, they talk about music and learning. And it's quoted that students of all ages, and that includes adults, generally find that music helps them focus more clearly on the task at hand and actually puts them in a better mood for learning. And then not just learning, the physical benefits and the health benefits from music are really striking as well. There was an article in USA Today in 2013 where they talked about a study, and this study found that listening to music after a workout can actually help the body recover faster. And of course, while slower music produced a more relaxing effect, it seemed that listening to any kind of music actually helped the physical recovery process speed up. And then for artists, we can intentionally select music as a background tool to enhance the mood of the work of art that we are creating. In Realism Today magazine, they had this quote talking about music that I loved, that is, music can be very useful, guiding artistic intentions through brush marks and color choices.
Well, I'm not a painter, and I'm certainly not a scientist, but I am a musician, and I did want to take some time to kind of give a little testimonial about how music has affected me, and the practice of music has really, played a role in my life. Growing up, I was an enthusiastic drummer, often practicing my drum set for like 5 or 6 hours a day. Sorry, neighbors. And music was really kind of about me time. It was a space for me to explore and to dive deep, a place to push myself as I learned new skills, and to also feel that excitement of getting good at something. When I was in high school, and I think that maybe this hasn't changed too much, I really liked playing with my eyes closed. I would often have that experience of, my surroundings melting away as I would just totally give all of my attention to some track I was playing along with. And I really liked that sensation. But what I didn't realize as I was practicing music for 5 or 6 hours a day growing up was that really I was forming habits that would end up translating to my mental approach to life in general. I was training myself to be detail-oriented, to be a creative problem solver, to be able to multitask, to be able to focus on the task at hand, and to be able to really trust my skills when it was time to put them to use. But in addition to playing, composing, and performing music for the last 15 years, I've also spent a lot of time teaching music. And, whether that be beginner or advanced players, kids or adults, I've watched music become a lifelong practice for many people. And aside from that individual growth, something as an educator that I've really honed in on over the last maybe, 6 or 7 years is just how awesome it is to watch a group of students learn together. There's just this certain magic that grows from that group dynamic of people taking on a new skill together. And I'd say that that's something that we really honed in on, Lindsay and I, when we were deciding to start this organization, Queen Bee Music, here in Santa Fe.
Yeah, music has been a part of our communities as humans for millennia, since the dawn of time, really. Humans have used music to tell stories, to celebrate, to mourn. Music enhances the connectivity with others, and playing music with others actually enhances the connectivity to music itself. There's a quote by Brian Tuck that I love that talks about music in a group setting. And it states that playing a musical instrument in a group actually engages more regions of the brain simultaneously than any other activity.
Even more than playing music and giving a PechaKucha presentation at the same time?
So.
Wow, that's impressive. But you know, on a serious note, I would say that group dynamic is something that we've really honed in on with Queen Bee and what we're offering here in Santa Fe. And this is a model that we didn't invent, of course. It's been around for decades, pioneered by schools like the Old Town School of Folk Music in Chicago and Swallow Hill Music up in Denver, where Lindsay and I first met teaching.
Yeah, and really the point is to not teach in that conservatory or private lesson style, but to use music as a tool to strengthen the connectivity and creativity of our students.
Yeah, and to really give them that opportunity to play together and experience music together, whether it's, you know, jamming together or, you know, having that free flow of musical energy between our participants in a low pressure environment.
Yeah. So how can you use music to enhance your own creative flow state?
You can compile a playlist that reflects the mood that you want to enhance.
You can learn an instrument.
And you can definitely play music with others, whether it's drumming, singing, dancing, or playing. These are all ways that we can feel that musical flow. Thanks, Annette.
Thank you, Brian and Lindsay. Annette, I don't know if I've ever seen a PechaKucha with music being played before. I like that it pulls us out of like the rigid way that it has to be, you know, still images and just a person talking, and brings out, music while we're watching the presentation. I thought that was really beautiful. Thank you.
That's so much fun. Brian had fun playing anyway.
I had a question. I was wondering how do you work with different individuals and start helping them understand vulnerabilities, help them understand, you know, we're taking new learning styles and asking kids, adults, people of all ages, how to think about practicing, engaging, presenting with others, collaborating with others. And there's a huge amount of vulnerability that has to happen with that. And I'm wondering, how do you create that environment? How do you get into that?
Sure, great question. You mind if I take this
Oh,
one?
no,
okay.
Go for it.
And you chime in as well. We didn't rehearse this part, you know, the answering of questions. I think that really at the core is taking that nervousness and turning it into empowerment. And I think step one for me, when I have a new student or a new group of students, it's my goal to play something by the end of our first class together. And I think that like showing that like, hey, check it out. Maybe you've had this guitar sitting in your closet for the last 7 years, or maybe you just got it as a gift and you're excited to play it. But regardless, look, we took 15 minutes and you're making music right off the bat. And I think that like right away, putting people in the driver's seat to that experiential learning and, you know, keeping a low pressure atmosphere while we're doing it. I mean, it's definitely, we want to learn our songs and we want to be able to play together and experience that learning as a group. But really, it's a low pressure environment and we try to keep it pretty casual, you know, make it so that we're laughing together and breaking the ice. I mean, I would say even sometimes more challenging than getting people to feel comfortable strumming or plucking on their new instrument is just like breaking the ice of a new group of individuals that, you know, chances are none of them know each other. And this is like a new social environment for us. And just, you know, trying to be able to develop some repertoire and rapport between our different members is, I think, at the key of that. And when people are able to laugh together and smile and be able to share a little bit about each other outside of music, I think that that it's just a matter of time before we feel comfortable to be able to play together. Plus, when you have 6 people in a group, if you're really uncomfortable and you can just air strum until you're ready for it. So, you know.
Want to make the noise. Yeah. No, laughter is key. Laughter is key. And we don't take ourselves too seriously. 9 times out of 10, I'm, making fun of myself in any situation that I'm in. But that really does break down those initial feelings of nervousness, is being able to laugh together. It's like, from Singing in the Rain, make them laugh. Yeah. Anyway.
It's working.
So can you tell us, like, specifically what kind of instruments you guys use as, in these kind of group settings?
Yeah, we teach a variety of instruments, and we actually have a variety of teachers who work with us at Queen Bee too. So we teach violin, guitar, ukulele, mandolin, banjo,
upright bass. We don't usually do group classes of upright bass. Can't find enough players.
We do a lot of summer camps with kids and
percussion, songwriting,
and then kids sing-alongs. Singing, songwriting. You said songwriting.
Yeah.
Flute. I teach flute as well. So we really do run the gamut as far as instrumentation, but it's all based on that non-conservatory approach. And so a lot of times we encourage people that, Queen Bee's mission is to support musicians no matter their age, aspiration, or ability. So if you are an adult student or an adult who said, God, I've always wanted to learn how to play guitar, but I don't want to be a professional musician, then, we are creating a home for you to come and learn. And that really is based off of that folk music model that Brian mentioned. The Old Town School of Folk Music in Chicago was founded in 1950s or early 60s, and Swallow Hill Music in Denver was founded in the late 70s. And then all across the country, in San Francisco and Portland and Boston, there are all these folk music models that base musical learning in a group setting, and it really just creates this wonderful low pressure environment.
It's about playing music together, being able to strum songs, and
and through those songs, then we'll mix in a little theory so that way what's going on as well.
Absolutely.
So we've been under COVID 2020, and now we're coming back up again. What is you guys' planned on, as parent of 4 here, I'm like, okay, I'm wanting to hear some camps time. How are you guys planning to kind of do this with this, at the cusp of just, trying to build something that feels safe to parents and kids?
Yeah, and adults as well. So we once COVID hit, we were able to move all of our group classes to an online setting, and we were focusing on private lessons in that way, with the exception of our early childhood kids sing-along that happened on a weekly basis. That was in a group setting.
Still online now.
Still online. And then, but this summer we are making the transition back to in-person learning with our summer camps for kids. We've got 4 different weeks of summer camps. Our kids bluegrass camp for 7 to 15-year-olds, and impact music camp for those 5 to 7-year-olds, and summer jam camp for 8 to 12-year-olds. And then we are actually doing a free weekly kids sing along for kids under the age of 5 at the Rail Yard Park Conservancy. So it's going to be outside, socially distanced, mask wearing if that public health order is still in effect.
But we're keeping a very close eye on both the CDC and the New Mexico state guidelines, and keeping that in mind. But I think the outside space, especially with we're singing songs and emphasis on singing there, and that's obviously not the safest activity that you could participate in an enclosed indoor space. So we definitely are going to be erring on the side of caution and taking taking close eye to what the recommendations are. And our entire teaching staff has been vaccinated at this point, so that's a way that we're helping to keep our staff safe as well. We've helped to get that happen, but we're excited to get back at it and get people playing music again in group. We've really missed it. The one-on-one lessons are great, and we've had a lot of fun with those, and I've made the best out of the digital world of the last year. But we're ready.
Mhm. Yeah.
Awesome. That's awesome. Can you guys just say your website address again one more time where people can find out more about
Yeah.
registration? And
Sure. We're Queen Bee Music Association, and the website is queenbeemusicassociation.org.
awesome.
Brian,
Okay.
Lindsay, thank you guys very much.
Thank
Yeah, thank you
you.
guys.
We'll certainly be looking forward to some group music in the future.
I think we should pitch for our board to do a board development. What do you think? Can you imagine Anthony learning how to play
Oh,
music,
man, we'll see.
instruments, singing songs? That would be really fun.
Yeah. Hi, Rickey. So our next presenter, Rickey Gates. Very excited about this presentation as well. Annette, do you want to introduce Rickey?
Yeah, I mean, Rickey, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, and we can see you too. Awesome. So I feel like you're pretty famous already. But if anybody who doesn't know Rickey, he's an ultra runner and a photographer. I think it was after 2016 election. How soon after that you ran across the country, Rickey?
It was pretty shortly after that, March of 2017.
So at the most kind of shock and tense moment in our country, Rickey decided to run across the United States to try to really experience America. And I just watched your film last night, Transamericana, and I'm in the same camp as you, Rickey. Like totally didn't understand what was happening. Like I realized from that election result that I didn't understand America either. And so that film, was this documentary of Rickey's journey across the country from, is it North Carolina to San Francisco?
South Carolina to San Francisco, correct, yeah.
And then, after that, when Rickey settled in San Francisco, he decided to run every street in San Francisco. And that started, I feel like a movement for the Every Single Street project. And now Rickey and his wife lives here in Santa Fe, and he is currently conducting a Every Street project for Santa Fe as well. And so tonight he's going to be sharing with us his insights regarding what he has observed through his experience being out in the world on his feet. So are you ready, Rickey?
I'm ready.
Okay, take.
Hi, I'm Rickey Gates, and I drew this with my feet. I look at it and see barking dogs, dead ends, a trailer park in the layout of a dartboard, newly constructed subdivision, and a brief stop at McDonald's for a soft serve ice cream. This image took me about 13 miles to draw over the course of about 2.5 hours. I call this project Every Single Street, and over the past few years, my feet and I have drawn nearly 2,000 miles of these images to cover the entirety of San Francisco, parts of Mexico City, and half of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Encapsulated in the title are the very simple parameters that I set forth for myself to cover every street and alley within a given neighborhood, town, or city. Now, one doesn't just spontaneously start making weird foot drawings. The inspiration came to me from a 3,700-mile long run across the US that I had drawn with my feet the previous year. The line was made up of iconic highways such as Route 50, nature trails, historical trails such as the Trail of Tears, and even a river, because I figured it was as good a way of any to get to know the country. Going across Kansas, I absorbed a particular interest in how many iterations of trails and boundaries coincided with something much more natural. Highway 50 had evolved from the Santa Fe Railroad, which evolved from the Santa Fe Trail, which had evolved from Native American hunting migrations and tribal boundaries. Upon the completion of that journey, two things occurred to me. One, that my intention was to truly understand the United States, then my journey, which was mostly rural, was incomplete. I needed to experience the urban. And the second was that pace on foot is the optimal pace to take in my surroundings. For most of human existence, we've moved about and interacted with our environment and our fellow human beings by foot. It is truly the most appropriate pace for compassion. When one covers as much ground in such a peculiar manner as I have done, such as pushing a golf caddy with my belongings across the American desert, it is a given that I would begin to contemplate both movement and environment, how we as human beings move throughout our cities and our neighborhoods, how we move throughout the day. To make sense of environment and movement, I came up with 4 simple categories. This involves a basic agreement that our own environment, this human environment, though dependent on the natural world, is a separate environment. The first category, natural movement through a natural environment, exemplifies nature in balance. This is a way that once upon a time we used to live. We can still see it out in the countryside, but it is a way that we've departed from. It is based on food, water, procreation, or safety. The next category, unnatural movement through a natural environment, is generally a result of human beings trying to tame nature to our needs, or for much more esoteric reasons, the desire to conquer nature. There is no reason to climb to the top of Mount Everest other than the reasons created by humankind. Having tamed or seemingly dominated nature, humans then revert back to behaving like animals and creating natural movements in our unnatural environments. This can be seen most clearly in a desire path, their very name suggesting a more natural or animalistic tendency, such as Olifantenpades, Dutch word for elephant path or beast trail. The fourth and final category is where I want to concentrate on, because this is where we move into a structured movement in a human-built environment. For me, the purpose of this final category is to better understand the structure and how we fit into it. In other words, disrupt the flow to understand the flow. As I took on my first every single street project of running all 1,200 miles of street in San Francisco, I reflected on the parallels to my own meditation practice. Though there are many types of meditation, the form that I'd like to speak about is called the Possum Meditation, a non-secular mindfulness practice with its roots in India and Myanmar. Vipassana translates from Pali or Sanskrit as superseeing or insight. The practice seeks the true nature of reality through a seemingly simple mindfulness practice that we have taken to call body scanning or body sweeping, focusing your mind's attention to the sensations of the body with equanimity and without judgment. So let's try. Close your eyes, breathe in, breathe out, and quite quickly scan your body from the top of your head down to the bottom of your feet and try to recognize the various sensations present. Recognize the feel of your shirt on your skin, the air coming and going from your nostrils, the weight of your body on your sit bones. See if you can feel your heart beating throughout various parts of your body, in your temples, in your feet. And now imagine doing this with a city, with your city. So I took on San Francisco with the same level of intentionality, encouraging myself to see and experience every corner of the city with equanimity and without judgment. At times, this simply meant appreciating the little water plate covers, ubiquitous throughout the city, that I had never seemed to notice before. And at other times, it meant talking to people that I wouldn't normally talk to, learning the names of trees, the price of popsicles, the name of a house color, a skateboard trick, or simply stopping to pet the dogs. In the fall of 2019, my wife and I moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico. I immediately set out to learn what I could by following the simple guidelines of every single street. In a city defined by cultural diversity, I have been allowing my focus on the seemingly mundane to be my guide. For if nothing else, it at least allows me to get out, meet my neighbors, and disrupt the personal flow of my daily life in order to recognize it. Thank you all for your time, and thank you to PechaKucha and Friends of Architecture Santa Fe for giving me this opportunity to share my presentation with you.
Rickey, thank you so much. I love the part at the end with the dogs barking. And there's that one that's kind of like hopping up and down. Like he's there and then he's gone. Yeah, I think we've all experienced that a little bit. Rickey, while you were doing some of the body scanning, I was thinking about trying to focus on every I think you mentioned every cell. Focus on all these different things, and then you bring up water plate covers. You bring up fire hydrants. You bring up dogs. You bring up people. You bring up meeting people, and I'm wondering how can you be so present? How can you focus on all the different items that are coming through? How can you give each of those things attention?
I think that for me, the key has been to come up with a small list of things that I'm actually looking for. It kind of, when I'm doing these every single street projects, it really is impossible to take in everything at the same time. Even though I want to, it's simply not possible. So in San Francisco, I had about 20 or 30 different items that I was looking for every single day, whether that be the water plate covers or interesting people to talk to, or a bunch of other things that I won't go into right now. But it was just kind of fun for me to start looking for these items out on the street. Here in Santa Fe, I've changed that up a little bit. Initially it was the fire hydrants, or in certain areas, in certain neighborhoods, just kind of paying attention to the reaction that I was getting from the dogs in that neighborhood. And then more recently, I've taken to looking for the little empty shooter bottles, which have now become illegal throughout all of New Mexico. So I'll probably have to find something else to look for. But yeah, I actually started bringing a little backpack with me and collecting them, and kind of in part to clean up the streets, but it also in part to kind of do my own personal study of what little shooter is popular in one neighborhood compared to another neighborhood, or if there's more in some neighborhoods or in less in other neighborhoods. But really, for me, it's about kind of finding these things that are interesting to me, that helps train my eye. Much like with the Vipassana meditation, you start off by concentrating on your breath. And the idea with this is to focus your attention on one very simple thing. And in doing that, you really sharpen your attention and you're able to proceed from there.
Rickey, I'm also curious, you talk about disrupting flow to understand it. You talk about like practicing, like the lines made with your feet, you said are unnatural paths in an unnatural environment. I think it was that part of the matrix. And that by doing that, you could understand more of the natural paths, which sounds kind of similar to what Maureo was talking about like breaking outside of gender binary to understand the gender binary more. Can you talk some more about how you are disrupting those systems to understand them more, or what you've learned?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think there's no argument to us as human beings being creatures of habit. It's how we progress through the human race. It's how we learn to make music and get really good at making music. It's how I, in my past, became a very strong runner and was able to pursue that as a career. But what it doesn't do is, or I should say what it also does is creates these paths that can make us very complacent, and then we fail to recognize kind of what we're doing every single day. And so if you look at a map, your own personal map, and there's actually applications, computer applications that you can track and kind of recognize your own personal maps. For me here in Santa Fe, it would be going from my house to my favorite coffee shop, and then from there to a trailhead, and from that trailhead to the grocery store, and then from the grocery store back to my house, or any variation of that I create 7 days a week. And then pretty soon you compile that day after day, week after week, year after year, and you're looking at a map where, say for in Santa Fe, I'm really only on a daily basis or even a weekly basis, I'm really only seeing 5 to 10% of the city. And it means that I'm kind of losing touch with my own city. I'm very in touch with my routine, but I'm losing touch with the city that I call home. And so by taking on something very simple like this, these simple parameters, it forces me to go out and experience parts of the city that I've completely forgotten about.
I think that's incredible. Because I'm thinking about the historic districts. I'm thinking about downtown. I'm thinking about cultural centers. I'm thinking about Cerrillos, St. Francis, St. Mike's, Airport Road, Agua Fria, et cetera. These major streets that I think a lot of us can connect with and identify. But we also end up kind of self-segregating ourselves and kind of losing our connection with other place. And this is a way to regain some of that, to understand that. Having run through some of these different places, can you talk about what some of your reflections are on the built and social environments within Santa Fe? Have you had any realizations on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can talk a little bit about Santa Fe, but keeping in mind that I've only moved here a year and a half, coming up on 2 years ago. My goal with Santa Fe was to really get to understand it as a new person with truly very little judgments already set in place. But for example, living in San Francisco, I was living there for 6 years by the time I did this project, and I had a whole lot of biases and judgments that I had made about certain parts of the city. And then there was other parts of the city that I had no thoughts on whatsoever, quite simply because I didn't realize that they existed. And yet we're all living together in what I would consider to be one house. We all participate in the same voting process. We all look at the same problems in the city. And in San Francisco, there's rampant homelessness and drug usage and other problems. So how can we look at those problems with a more informed point of view? And there's a lot of ways to go about doing that. You can read newspapers and listen to podcasts, but inherently those are also biased. And you can talk to your friends and your family, but again, that's also biased. But a way of trying to remove that bias is, again, kind of doing this body scan, this city scan, and treating every part of the city with the same level of respect and equanimity.
Carlos, do you have a follow-up question?
Not yet.
Okay.
I'm still thinking.
Because I forgot. I realized I was having so much Zoom issue that I forgot to mention who you were. And so Carlos is actually a city planner, currently, an urban planner currently working for the city of Santa Fe. And when you were asking this question of Rickey, I thought it was really interesting. We have all these kind of boundaries about neighborhoods, right, that are already kind of prescriptive within the city GIS maps. And it would be fascinating to have Rickey, without knowing all of that, draw his own kind of like, what are the kind of similarity from his perspective based on this experience? Like, Rickey, like, I think that was the question I thought that you were asking, Carlos, about what are kind of observation? Are you seeing patterns? I know it's an interesting question because you're not judging So where, you know, like maybe this is not, maybe you wouldn't feel comfortable, but are there patterns that you're seeing so far?
So yeah, there are patterns here that I see in Santa Fe. One thing is that in a lot of ways, due to the age of Santa Fe compared to the rest of the United States, it's much more organic. The layout of the city is much more organic than a lot of cities in the US that are based on more of a grid pattern. So that's just a simple observation. And then another one, kind of in the newer expanses of the city, it's not quite newer, but how many dead-end streets there are in Santa Fe compared to a place like San Francisco. Number one, dead-end streets, and number two, streets that are technically public, but have a gate going across them. And saying no trespassing, this is private. And I've actually been pulled over by a police officer here in Santa Fe because I went down a public street and somebody called the cops on me to come investigate what this person was doing. So this is kind of in my own observation, looking at a city that has a lot of history that I'm learning a little bit more about all the time. And how there's, frankly, there's a lot of segregation in the city, and to see that firsthand and experience it is really fascinating. And again, I try not to pass judgment on this. It's something that at this point in this project, I like to go out and simply observe it, and with almost a scientific sort of approach to it. Anthropologist and recognize that this is how things are at this moment in time. But I don't think that we can make progress without truly understanding where we stand in this current position. So that's kind of my goal right now.
That's awesome. Yeah, so that leads to one of the question in the Q&A here by Chris Longley Postuma. He's asking, you know, that how have people received you running through their streets and neighborhoods, and you know, through the country, you know, like can you give us kind of like, have you like thought about, oh, here are the top 5 responses that I get most often?
I can say on my run across the country that I was most warmly received by people in the South. That was an absolutely perfect way to start my trip, because I started off alone and kind of scared and nervous and not sure what I was doing, and was immediately taken in by every type of person all throughout the South. When I was doing this project in San Francisco, I was received also really quite warmly. And in some neighborhoods, just kind of people looking at me a little bit strange, asking what I was doing there and explaining my project, and them being super receptive towards it. In Santa Fe, it has been quite different. I haven't really gotten my finger on the pulse quite yet, but I have met a lot of really wonderful people, and I'm just sort of starting to understand the demographic layout of a city like this. It's amazingly a very compact city for being whatever it is, 6 miles by 12 miles. The amount of history that's packed into this very small area it's super complicated, and for me personally, having the ability to move around on foot and to experience it in this way, I wouldn't want to formulate an opinion in any other way other than through my own eyes and my own interactions.
That's awesome. You know, we had talked about, and I'm not sure if you're still up for this, for a bonus segment tonight, where we wanted to, you know, kind of end the evening with you leading a body scan meditation style. So a little bit longer than that 2-slide. Are you still up for that?
I'm still up for that. Yeah.
Awesome. So, I think we're going to need to get through a few more things, and then we'll bring you back on to do that bonus segment at the end. Okay, Rickey?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rickey. So next we have an introduction to a program kind of similar to what some of the stuff that Rickey Gates has done. Spacespeak. Lila and Jean, are you guys with us today?
Yeah, hi.
Great. Hi, Lila. Jean. So Spacespeak is an online portal for crowdsourced virtual architecture tours. So another way to kind of understand environments, to record some of those personal narratives about built spaces in Santa Fe. Lila and Jean, do you want to start sharing your presentation with us?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. So hi, everyone. My name is Lila, and I'm on the board for Friends of Architecture Santa Fe, and I'm also the chair of our Architecture Tours program.
Hi there, my name is Jean, and I volunteer with the program where I help with the production side.
We want to tell you briefly about our newest tours initiative, which is called Spacespeak, and it launched this spring. Spacespeak is an online portal for crowdsourced virtual architecture tours. It's an open call for personal narratives about your favorite built spaces in Santa Fe. We believe that it's the people who inhabit the spaces in our city who give them meaning. So we want to hear about them directly from you. The submissions are hosted online in an interactive map database. Every green dot on this map is an individual's story about a space in Santa Fe that speaks to them. Our dream is that this map will be a resource for both residents and visitors to learn about the unique layers of stories that exist within the built environment of our city. Here's an example of one of the submissions that currently lives on the map. This one is by Dan Reeves.
When most people think of Santa Fe, they think of natural beauty, southwestern landscapes, and quiet peace. And they would be right, Santa Fe has those things. However, Santa Fe is still a city, and within it, there are areas of cityscape fully equipped with noise and human-made landscapes. As a city person, I find comfort in these places, and the place that represents this feeling best is the Handball Courts located across from Regal Park at the intersection of Zia and Yucca. Everything about this space exudes city life, from the car traffic to the massive concrete structure for public use to the full-size murals encasing the structure. So if you've had enough of the natural beauty, take a seat on the bench and take in a handball game and let the pop of the handball satisfy your city dweller senses.
So this submission started with a few photographs and a paragraph of text, and with the help of Jean was transformed into this really awesome video. So what do we need from you in order to participate? The first step is to choose your space. It can be defined however you want. The only parameters are that the space contributes to our built environment in some way and that it speaks to you personally. So the next step is to visually document it, whether that's through photos, videos, drawings, and then you provide a brief written narrative telling us why the space matters to you. You'll find the submission form for Spacespeak on the Friends of Architecture Santa Fe website under Architecture Tours. And you can also find our contact page through our website if you have any questions.
So after your submission has been made, I will reach out via email to notify you when your chosen space has been uploaded to the map. And in addition to this, as seen in the previous video, in efforts to make the tours a more immersive experience for visitors, we are inviting participants to record an audio narrative that I then compile with the provided images and text, and I go out and collect site-specific field recordings. You are also welcome to do this, but we compile all of this together to create a piece that sonically represents your chosen space. So to do this, a clear recording can be captured with the recording app on any smartphone. Feel free to read your description like a script. My only suggestion would be to find a quiet and cozy space to record so we can be sure to highlight your voice in the clearest way possible. And once I have completed the sound piece, I will send a draft for you to review, and if approved, it will be uploaded to the map. And this is all, of course, optional. An audio narrative is not necessary to participate. Your submission will still exist on the Spacespeak map with your description and photos. And if you have any questions regarding this process, please feel free to ask in the chat, and I will be sure to follow up.
So we hope that this introduction gets you thinking about what space you want to see live on our Spacespeak map. We do have a little extra incentive to participate in the program these coming months. Anyone who submits during the months of May or June will have their name entered into a drawing for a gift card to a local restaurant. Opuntia, Sky Coffee, and Cafecito are 3 of the participating restaurants that you could win a gift card to. And we are going to be doing the drawing live at the next PechaKucha event, which is on July 21st. So thank you very much. We look forward to seeing your submissions.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lila. Thank you, Jean.
Yeah, thank you, Jean. Thank you, Lila. That was interesting. Yeah, all of that stuff is available through the Friends of Architecture website. That's architecturesantafe.org. And you can look up the different programs that we have. Other upcoming events that the Friends of Architecture will be hosting on June 17th will be Revisioning History. Revisioning History is an attempt to provide a holistic, provocative, and solutions-focused discussion on achieving equitable and sustainable housing outcomes for everyone within Santa Fe. And so we are putting together a list of presenters for that. That's going to be, again, June 17th, 5:30 to 7:30. There's also another PechaKucha, Volume 11. The theme is boundaries. So thinking about different ways that we work within or overcome different types of boundaries. You can look at that through our website. Again, that's architecturesantafe.org. And that will be on July 21st. So we're accepting submissions, we're accepting submissions for that presentation on July 21st. Submissions, send those in to us by May 31st. And we will start looking into those various presentations.
So, I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and definitely thanking the presenters for the amazing amount of work that they have put together to tell a story in 6 minutes and 40 seconds. That is not an easy feat. And again, we do want to thank you for staying through the night. And for anyone who is interested in having an experience of a body scan meditation, we're going to bring Rickey on at the end of this. Let me see here. Carlos, are you there?
I am.
Can you see the slide of our sponsors?
I can, yeah.
Awesome. Tonight's event, PechaKucha program is my beloved program here at Friends of Architecture Santa Fe, but there are other organizational sponsors that support the entire operation. And we invite anyone in our community that wishes to step up to be our organizational sponsor to please contact us. We would love to have your support. But we would like to thank Hoops and Associates, as well as Sue B. Bowden and Associates, as well as Design Core for their work in the Revisioning History series and helping us promote that event. And again, we welcome all of your contribution to support our program. There is a donation portal that one can visit and show us that you appreciate what we do here. We thank you so much for being here with us. And Rickey, are you still here?
I am here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. I am going to try to stop share. And I'm going to turn off my camera. And I'm going to let you take the night away from us here and close it out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Wonderful program that you guys put together. I'm honored to be a part of it. This last little bit is just kind of hopefully a 1 minute long meditation. And we'll be starting now. So if you want to sit, I would assume everyone's already sitting right now. Close your eyes. There's nothing to see on the screen in front of you. And for the first few seconds, we're just going to simply breathe in and breathe out through our nose. And recognize your breath, the feeling that it makes when you breathe in, and the similar but different sensation when you exhale. Notice the change in temperature of the breath when it leaves your nose. Now let's scan from the top of our head, very top of our head. And just recognize all the little sensations that emerge as we go down from the top of the head down to the bottom of your feet. Down your face, your skull, back of your head, the front of your neck, the back of your neck, your shoulders, arms, the front of chest and belly. Feel the fabric on your belly when you breathe in and breathe out. Upper back, lower back. Feel the weight of your body sitting on your butt, your legs, your knees. Try to see if you can notice the blood pulsing through your legs and your ankles, and then down into your toes. And continue on and on as you see fit. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ricky. Have a good night.